Welcome everyone. This election season, the North Pacific's Ministry of Radio is sponsoring a series of voice, chat and text-based town halls for each candidate. We hope this event is informative, and we encourage you to participate by posting questions in the chat. And now, let's get started. Hello, Cretox.
Hello.
Would you mind giving us a brief history of yourself within the region and a bit of history of positions on the region government that you've held?
Certainly. So, compared to the other candidates running in this election for delegate and speaker, I am quite new to the region. I only joined mid-May 2020. Since then, however, I've held various positions, including, let's see, chronological order, Deputy Minister of WA Affairs, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Deputy Speaker, Election Commissioner, Minister of WA Affairs, and now Security Counselor.
Why did you decide to run for Vice-Delegate?
Initially, I wasn't actually planning to run for Vice-Delegate, at least not until the current Vice-Delegate Dredton declared that he would not be running for re-election. And I decided to give it a go mostly because I had some ideas for the position. I felt as though I was qualified, and I am currently a security counselor, so I have the benefit of working with the Security Council and experience in how to effectively chair it.
What makes you stand out from other potential candidates in case of a run, and why should voters consider you over the possibility of a run or repeat of nominations?
Well, I believe that given I have served in the cabinet, I'm currently on the SC, I have the qualifications necessary to do the job. And
If you... Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Continue.
And I believe that what I bring to the table in terms of new initiatives, I have planned to increase the reach and visibility of the office, in addition to my ability to do checks effectively, as I demonstrated when I was Deputy Speaker, and my ability to effectively work with the SC. I think that in the event run does happen, someone else runs against me, I would be a better choice, though honestly at this point I'm not certain who would be a viable candidate in addition to myself out of those who haven't already declined or haven't expressed that they are not interested in running. I don't believe that reopening nominations would be effective at this point, since I can't actually think of even a single person who hasn't declined a nomination, who is qualified, and who has actually expressed some kind of interest. I believe that if this does go to run, then it's simply going to delay the election. Nothing else.
If you were elected, what would you do to strengthen the relationship between yourself and to strengthen the relationship and incumbent delegate, or what would you do to assist with a potential new delegate such as Macedonia?
First off, given my current level of endorsements, I would be able to transition to my own in-game position of number 2 in endorsements quite quickly, and I'm familiar with Security Council alerts, with other tools we have available for boosting the endorsements of people in the region. I believe that given where McMasterdonia, the primary and only challenger against Toms, is right now, he should also not have much difficulty moving to the number 1 spot, provided he wins. I think that the transition shouldn't take more than a few weeks, and I don't believe it's going to be severely detrimental, even if it ends up being delayed for whatever reason.
All right. Next question is, if there were a situation where you were to disagree with the cabinet, How would you express that disagreement?
I'm assuming for the purposes of this question that I'll have access to the Executive Council channel.
Very well.
All right. So assuming that I have access to the Executive Council, I would likely bring up whatever concerns I have there, or depending on the nature of my concerns, I might bring it up privately to the delegate and go from that point.
Very well. What do you think matters you fit to be Vice-Delegate? And why should voters consider your experience and strengths to be superior to others?
Could you please repeat the first part of the question? I couldn't quite make that out.
Yeah, sorry. What do you think makes you fit to be Vice-Delegate? What are your strong parts to be Vice-Delegate?
Okay. My first strength is simply my activity, that as WA Minister this last term, I've been known for being considerably active, for being involved in not only what my staffers are doing, but what the deputies are doing, and generally what's going on in the ministry and the executive government as a whole. I believe that I can easily carry over this similar level of activity to the office of Vice Delegate. And simply having an active, involved delegate who's present in the wider community, who does checks as efficiently as possible without compromising their comprehensiveness, I think that alone is an incredibly useful trait to have in the VD. In addition to that, as I've said, I'm currently on the SC. I have experience working with the SC. I have experience working with the Executive Council. So I see transitioning to Vice Delegate from my current executive position as just that, a transition. I'm not really expecting it to be this immense leap that I'm unprepared for.
We've talked about your strengths, now tell us about your weaknesses.
If I had to point to relevant weaknesses, I'd say I have one that stands out above the rest, and that's, I think someone actually asked me this in my campaign, and my response would be that I have a tendency to take on large projects, attempt to do them on my own without involving others, even when those other people are just as capable as myself of assisting or of doing the work themselves. For example, many of the new programs that I've implemented as Minister of WA Affairs, such as Accelerator Program, that's used in on sponsorship, our little cards point reward contest, it's mostly been myself coming up with these ideas and taking the time to execute them myself. I think that this is simply a weakness because it doesn't utilize the full potential of what we have available as a ministry or as an executive government as a whole. As Vice Delegate, firstly, I think that I can work on this by involving the Security Council in what I'm doing, by actively seeking out the advice of the SC, so that I'm not shooting in the dark, so to speak. Second, the Security Council is not really a ministry. It's not as though I'm the one leading the SC, it's more so that I'm chairing the SC as Vice Delegate, and I'm guiding where the SC is going. I'm not going to try to bark orders at security counselors, basically. So I think that what initiatives I do have planned out, I can handle on my own, involve the SC where necessary, and this weakness shouldn't be compromising.
Talking about what the office means, what does the office of Vice Delegate mean to you, personally?
I see the office of Vice Delegate as more an anchor than anything else, in that obviously it is a security-focused position. You're chairing the Security Council, And in that sense, it requires someone who is not only active, but who is above all competent and who isn't going to burn out or get bored or attempt to do controversial stuff that could compromise the office's integrity. I think that as a delegate, you have so much more flexibility to outline a comprehensive vision, even micromanage a bit. But as a vice delegate, you really need that element of stability since you're the one who everyone is going to be looking for, who everyone's going to be looking towards if a delegate emergency should happen, if there is some other form of emergency, or if there is a legitimate threat to the region's security.
What would make you any different from previous mice delegates? And what would you change? What would you do to improve the work of the previous vice delegates?
By previous vice delegates, do you mean previous VDs in general or the last 1-2 vice
Previous
delegates?
BDs in general.
All right, so I believe that up to this point, we've had quite a long line of vice delegates who, while they are competent, they do their work effectively, they don't necessarily expand the reach of the office, and they don't make major strides in community involvement or in simply laying additional infrastructure to that end. This is something I focused on in my platform, and it's something I intend to focus on should I be elected to the office. That I plan to have events on the RMB working with culture to expand the reach of the vice delegate in terms of the visibility of the vice delegate and the SC in general. I intend to work with Home Affairs on a sort of forum mentoring modification where the vice delegate or members of the SC reach out to new forum members who pass the VD check, with the goal being to expose new members of the region to the vice delegate, the Security Council, and general opportunities in the executive early on. So my theme going into the office is plain and simple. It's continuing the competent, solid work of previous vice delegates and adding in some new stuff and new infrastructure that's likely to improve community interaction with the office and improve the relationship between the office and the region as a whole.
Okay. Next question is: do you think you are assertive enough to deal with major issues such as arguments, infighting, raids, wars, etc.? And would you be able to handle said issues if called in to replace the delegate, for example?
I believe that this is an area where my current experience on the Executive Council and my current experience as a minister of an external ministry is going to come in handy because I have experience working with the Executive Council, and I believe that given that I maintain my current activity and involvement with the Executive Council as Vice Delegate, which I fully intend to do, I won't have any major problems stepping in for the delegate should that prove necessary, since I would essentially be transitioning from one position involved with the Executive Council to another position heavily involved with the Executive Council. Only I'll be in a better position to endorsement-wise, influence-wise, and with the tools that are available to me to ensure that replacing the delegate doesn't turn into a catastrophe and that it's as painless for the region as possible.
How can be so sure that you have the enough trust level, respect, and likability required to be vice delegate?
Well, that's a good question. I think we'll get our definitive answer when voting starts. But
Fair enough.
that aside, I would say my first major test of trustworthiness, ability to do the role well, and public confidence was my application and later confirmation to the Security Council. Because going from just a security counselor to vice delegate, I don't see it as that big of a leap in all honesty. And the region as a whole was generally supportive of that application to the Security Council. I believe that many of the reasons for supporting me for the Security Council carry over to my campaign for vice delegate.
Wouldn't you think that your position as a chairman within the Security Council would make you have some form of a conflict of interest as being part of the as being the vice delegate?
I don't really see a substantial conflict of interest there, given that, firstly, we've had vice delegates and even delegates in the past who are members of the Security Council. And from what I've seen, and my personal belief is that being on the Security Council as vice delegate is only of benefit, since I would be going into the job with exposure to exactly what would be expected of me, with access to the materials I need early on. And I believe that my position as vice delegate won't give me any sort of unfair advantage or any additional weight to my vote when matters come to the SC for a vote, such as applications of new people or other stuff. I think that the Security Council at this point has enough institutional memory. It's full of people considerably older in the region and in nation states in general than I am. I think that as vice delegate, I'm not going to be unfairly swaying the votes of upper security councilors if that's a concern. I'm not going to be using my position for corrupt purposes, and even if I attempted that, I believe that the region has enough infrastructure and enough safeguards and enough redundancies to prevent that from becoming a reality.
Over the last months of the region, there has been a lot of talks, as we all are aware of, about more transparency within the region at large. And there has been, among other things, the most notorious one, some form of request, reform to make the Security Council more open for the people of the region. As you are a chairman within the Security Council and you are a candidate for vice delegate, what do you think of such a reform or calls for reform for more transparency within the council?
Are you, just to clarify, are you referring to transparency in general, or are you referring to specific bills that were brought before the RA, such as disclosure or anything more specific?
In general.
All right, so I think that in general, transparency is this um, vague umbrella term, and it's really up to whoever's in the position to act on it to define what exactly transparency means for them. As vice delegate, for me, transparency really just means two things. One, obviously, disclosure, maintaining an active stance on disclosure, and trying to get declassification done in an efficient and timely manner. The second part is more broad. I view transparency as an ongoing effort by government officials, not just the vice delegate or the Security Council. I believe that transparency really stems from being open about intentions, being open about progress, about what you're doing, obviously without revealing anything compromising or classified. Transparency is generally simply a metric of engagement with the wider regional community. I believe that being as active in the government as I was for the past term, I won't have any issues going into the vice delegacy with community involvement or with simply being open, releasing timely vice delegate reports, just making people believe and understand that what I'm doing is in the best interests of the region, and just allowing people to keep tabs on what progress I'm making.
Very well. Now it's the time. If you're listening in, you can actually post your questions within the Agora text chat room. So if you have any questions, you can go ahead, post them now. In the meantime, Cretox, you have 60 seconds to say whatever you think the electorate needs to hear. A bit. You have 1 full minute for yourself, and the minute starts now.
I understand that the Vice-Delegate election, this election cycle, might not be particularly interesting due in large part to the fact that I'm the only candidate at the moment. However, I believe that I'm the best candidate out of any who may have been interested in running, but didn't for their own reasons. I believe that the public should be confident that I'm a good fit for the role and that my platform speaks for itself.
Very well. You have 20 seconds left. You seem to don't want to use them. So we will begin with the first question from Bobarino, which says, what is the airspeed velocity of an unlanded swallow?
That seems like a very trivial question, therefore I'll give a trivial answer. The airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow. Next question.
The next question is from the Cascadian Bioregion, who has two of them. The first question is, what is your opinion on RMB regulation?
Cascadian, could you elaborate on what you mean by RMB regulation?
Meanwhile, the second question is, since you were significantly newer around here, do you think that newer users should be in more positions?
That is a good question. Do you mean more positions in terms of being more spread out or being in the region longer before running for elected office?
In the meantime, BMW says, how do you feel about Brandog's application to the Security Council?
With Brendog, I felt as though it was in... Okay, his... Are you referring to the most recent one or his previous application and this one as a whole?
Cascadian cleared out that they mean,
Okay.
as in, do you support more suppression of posts or less suppression, as in newer that they have joined?
Yes, I also like my strategy. That's why I'm using it. Thank you.
Cascadian has cleared out the...
Okay, so regarding suppression of posts, I think that the game side advocates, and in addition to those who are policing the RMB, so to speak, such as Triton, okay, I see that. I don't think there's any sort of quota or any sort of metric to much suppression, to little suppression. I think that the game side advocates are currently doing an excellent job keeping the RMB healthy and active, and I believe that they're honestly the best people to judge what constitutes too much suppression. I think that if there's an issue with too many posts being suppressed, there are proper channels to bring it up through, and it's really a matter for the government as a whole to discuss, especially with something so significant as RMBers and the RMB community. Yeah, BMW, I was just uncertain if you're referring to specifically the most recent application or previous one.
In the meantime, I
Number
would like to ask you, how does it feel to be the only one running for Vice-Delegate? To be basically in a race against a repeat of nomination?
The sad thing here is that it's not unheard of in this region. I believe that, in general, new people are far too hesitant to run for elected office, and that as a result, we get these boring, stale elections. With delegate is an exciting position. There are typically quite a few candidates. I don't think that's a problem, but with vice delegate and speaker, I feel that firstly, new people feel intimidated by these more specialized roles, and secondly, I believe that newer people who might have potential or who might want to run simply to get their names out there hesitate to do so because of a lack of understanding of what the positions actually entail. It's something I'm
Uh,
confident Barbarino and Robespierre can work on, whoever ends up being elected to speaker. As vice delegate, focus of mine is going to be giving new people more exposure to the vice delegate, to the Security Council, just making us more visible.
BMW Software has cleared up that with the application from Brandrock. Do you feel that they have done enough to warrant being on the Security Council? And do they maintain enough activity to be on the Security Council?
I think that Brendog is definitely a loyal member of the region. He's held numerous positions. He's been in here for quite a bit of time. And I have no doubts about his commitment to the region. I don't believe he's a security threat in any sense. The Security Council rejected Brendog's previous application, not this most recent one, the one before that, several months ago, due to a noted tendency to take long breaks without warning and to generally have bouts of activity in between periods of inactivity. I think that
West
Brendog has improved on that to some degree going into his second application to the SC, but I don't believe he's demonstrated the level of consistent activity in the region to justify overturning the SC's previous statement on the matter. I think that given a bit more time, if Brendog shows himself to be active, reliable, involved in the government, and involved with the region without long pauses, I would be far more comfortable supporting his application. I think that there's no question about his commitment to this region. I think there's no question that he would be a fine, if a bit mediocre choice at the moment, should he have been accepted onto the SC. It's simply an activity and reliability question at this point, honestly.
Robert Westinor has a question, which is, what is your favorite color?
My favorite color is a good color, a strong, powerful color. The people come out of their houses, they're crying, "Sir, sir, you have the best colors. You're a very colorful person." And they're weeping. They're weeping big, manly tears. So that's my answer.
Boverino asks, is BMW Surfer a good, a bad park bench?
I don't think we should hold park benches such as BMW Surfer to an arbitrary standard such as good or bad. We should attempt to
Ghost
quantify their contributions. For example, quantifying BMW's contributions to the executive staff. Over the last term, he has done a fantastic job as Minister of Communications.
Ghost asks, candidate Cretox, what is an acceptable standard of activity for an applicant to be on the Security Council?
This is an interesting question. This is, I would say it's basically the question that Brandog's last application to the SC hinged on. And I myself was quite on the fence regarding his application. An acceptable standard of activity would be someone who the region can count on to be active, engaged in SC discussions, who is a person who's active enough that there are no lingering doubts about their ability to not take long pauses and to not, how do I phrase this? I think the activity question mostly just comes down to sustained levels of activity where the person is, where there are no lingering doubts about the person disappearing for periods of time, taking long breaks. I believe that the SC as a whole is entering a new period of expectations for increased transparency and increased activity. And I think that, oh, yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. You were sorry. Please
I
do
think,
continue.
yeah, I think that there are increasing expectations for the SC to be involved with the region on a daily basis and to be active in more areas than simply the Security Council. I think that Brandog has been doing excellent work as a game side advocate. Again, as I previously said, I think it's simply an issue of being able to count on the person to be there and actively involved. I would 100% support Brandog's application to the Security Council should he demonstrate a sustained level of activity for a bit of time without major pauses.
Robespierre asks, who would you like to see join the Security Council? Is there anyone that you feel would have made a great opponent for you had you not been running unopposed? Robespierre also wants to clear out that they understand you would not be comfortable answering the first question, so you are free to default to the second question.
Mhm. The first question, I would say, I don't like to have an expectation of people who I want to join the SC, since there are many factors that go into a person's decision to apply for the SC, and there are many factors that go into whether a person is accepted to the Security Council or not. So I would say rather than getting an idea of who I want to join the SC, I'll simply encourage people who believe they have the qualifications to be on it to apply and go from there.
And the last
Oh, for the
question
second
comes.
question, definitely. I think that Dretton would have made a great opponent should he have decided to run. He's been doing a solid job the past term. He's had a really competent handle on the office, and were he running as an incumbent, I think it would have made for a very interesting election.
As the last question, BMW Surfer asks, you mentioned in your platform that you plan to work with communications to create a Security Council oriented the Northern Star article. Do you wish to elaborate more on this, specifically about what this article would include?
Absolutely. So the TNS is more review-oriented than TNO, the Northern Lights. I'm certain you're aware of this as communications minister. But TNS already runs WA digests, regional assembly highlights, overviews of events such as the Lenarts, overviews of elections that have occurred. I think that an article covering Security Council and Vice-Delegate related business over the past month with a similar format to WA Digests, RA highlights, election coverage, that sort of thing, simply covering how many Vice-Delegate checks were processed, whether anything notable happened in the past month with regards to SC applications, rejection of citizenship applications by the Vice-Delegate, disclosure process, simply anything that a comm staffer or whoever volunteers to write for TNS that particular month believes is relevant in covering the SC's progress. I think that it wouldn't take too much effort to come up with a viable format for this type of article. I think we can easily build off of prior existing articles that TNS runs. And I think that it would definitely contribute to increasing public visibility and confidence concerning the SC's activities and progress that the SC and the Vice-Delegate have made on various initiatives.
Very well. That will be the end for this town hall. Thank you very much, Cretox, for having the time to be with us. Thank you very much, everyone who has joined us for this last town hall of today. And we will see you on the next town hall. This is Vivanco for the Ministry of Radio of the North Pacific. Have a pleasant night.